Welcome to the Polgar Chess University. In this lesson, our topic is Breakthrough in Pawn Endgames. Let's get started with our first example. Here we go. Well, in this pawn endgame, we're having equal number of pawns for both sides. And it is absolutely crucial whose turn it is. These type of endgames you cannot typically judge by intuition or by common sense. It does require precise calculation, and it usually matters a whole great deal whether whose turn it is. Well, in our case, luckily for black, it is their turn. And this is actually from a real game played in Russia in 2003 by Yandarimov versus Rublevsky. And here the key point is that black needs to create a passed pawn. As so often in pawn endgames, that is one of the main elements. To create a passed pawn, and then there can be various scenarios. Either the other side will also have a passed pawn, and it becomes a race between the two pawns. Or, alternatively, the king is successful in catching the passed pawn on time, so when the pawn would promote, you can capture the new queen. However, what that would entail is that the king would need to get far away from his own pawns, and therefore allowing the opponent to capture one or more pawns and gain advantage that way. And that is exactly what we will see in this example. Black, first of all, sacrifices a pawn, at least temporarily, in order to create a passed pawn. Let's see how that works out. The first correct move for black is to play h4. If black wouldn't have rushed with that move, for example, makes a careless waiting move by playing a6, then the white king could get to e3, protecting the pawn on f4 another time, which is important. So if black now would play h4 and the white pawn captures it, then the f4 pawn is still protected after the g3 pawn is no longer there. Okay, so the correct move was to play immediately h4 and create the passed pawn, while after pawn takes pawn, the f4 pawn is now unprotected. However, things are not quite as simple as I may have made it sound. In fact, capturing that very pawn on f4 would be a major mistake and would give white a chance to survive. Let's see why it's not accurate to right now capture the pawn on f4. In that case, the white king would run back on time to e2. And now, if g3, push the h-pawn, now the white pawn is about to run away and get promoted, so black must move next to the pawn to catch it. But then the white king gets to the black pawn just on time, and in this position, black doesn't have any way to create an advantage or win. Okay, let's go back again. We said h4, pawn takes, and it's a mistake to capture the pawn on f4. But let's check out what may happen if after the correct king e2 move, right now the black king would try to go the other way to e4. Well, that certainly will not do any good for black, because remember, white still has an outside passed pawn on h4. So right now, white would play king f2, and black better repeat moves and plays king f4 to at least not to lose the game. If instead the king would capture on d4, white would play king g3, grab the pawn on g4, and reach a winning pawn endgame because the white pawn on h4 is more distant from the rest of the pawns. So therefore the black king will be busy holding off that pawn while the white king will have the time to simply eat up the black pawns on e6 and then on the queen side. So that's certainly not something for black to do. Going back to the beginning, after h4 and pawn takes, the only correct move to reach a winning position is to play g3 right away. A very important move. So now the black pawn is threatening to advance further and promote, and the white king must get closer in trying to reach the promotion square on g1. Let's first check out what happens if the white king returns to e2. In that case, just as if the king would have gone to e3, black will respond with king g4. That pawn needs support. So black's idea is to come closer and support the promotion square on g1. After king g4, if white now would play king f1 to reach the promotion square, then the black king would simply pick up the pawns, first of all white's passed pawn, and then walk back and grab the other pawn as well. On the other hand, if white pushes the h-pawn, trying to deflect the black king has the time to simply capture it, and then when the g3 pawn gets attacked, protect that with king h4. Now the only thing black needs to be careful of in this situation, that white can create another passed pawn by sacrificing one and then opening up the road of the other. So if pawn now from e6 captures on f5, the d pawn would run away. However, black still has a winning opportunity here, and this is a perfect example that proves how important calculations are in pawn endgames. So right now it becomes a race, because unavoidably white is creating a passed pawn. In the meantime, black cannot yet advance the g passed pawn because the white king for now is holding it off. So therefore it was quite crucial to right now play king h3. And unfortunately for white, regardless if the pawn advances straight forward on the f file or captures on e6, in any case the newly born white queen will be lost because of skewer. After black promotes and now white promotes, look what happens. Black checks, forces the white king onto the e file, and then with a second check the white queen is lost. Very nice variation. Let's go back. So now we know, right? You have to play h4, pawn takes, and hurry up, push the pawn. Let's check out how it may be different if white plays king e3 instead of king e2. Well, things are rather similar. Black will still play king g4, and if now f5, again it is important to make sure that the white pawn will promote on a file or on a square where black will have the opportunity to win the new queen. As we can see, white potentially has an option to advance the f pawn on f8, capture the e6 pawn and then on e8, or alternatively, if black would capture right now on f5, the d pawn would be the one promoting. So therefore, it's quite important for black to give white only the options in which the new queen can be still won. And the best way to achieve that is to play g2 right now, although king h3 did the job as well. King f2, king h3. If now fe6, black will simply arrive first after king h2 and then the pawn promoting with a check. Let's check out a variation what happens if in this position instead white would intend to occupy the promotion square. And this is another rather common theme in pawn endgames. Now black would capture the pawn, and doesn't matter which passed pawn white would push, whether the h or the d, black would play king g3, and this is another pawn race, however not for pawn promotion, but, or at least it's pawn promotion for white, but not for black, just on time when white promotes the pawn first, even though black does not promote a pawn. Now black checkmates just on time. Pretty amazing endgame, isn't it? Let's move on to our next example. Here we are. In this endgame again, we have a pawn endgame with even number of pawns. Generally, such endgames, especially with no passed pawns in view, should be a draw. And in fact, if it would be white's turn, the game would be a draw. However, oftentimes in such situations, there are zugzwangs, or in this case, there is a way indeed to create a passed pawn. It seems hard to imagine, though, how in this case black can create a passed pawn. And I'd like you to remember this pattern. It's quite impressive. Black's way to create a passed pawn is to sacrifice a pawn, even though the white king will be able to catch black's passed pawn on time, but nevertheless that will give the black king the time to get around and grab a number of white pawns. Before we look at the correct move, I'd like to point out that other moves are not good at all, in fact, would give the opportunity for white to win. For example, playing king f6 and then king d5, black would find himself in zugzwang, meaning that the black king will need to move and then the e5 pawn will be lost. Also, if we compare pawn capture, it would certainly favor white, because now on the next move, white would have the opportunity to create an outside passed pawn by playing h5. And then again, playing king d6 also would give white the upper hand by now trading the pawns and then trading another pair of pawns, and the white king would get real fast to black's weakness on h5. So amazingly, that despite all these natural moves that actually lose for black, black has a winning opportunity. And black did find it and played g5. Now white can capture either pawn, the one on h5 or the one on g5. If white captures the one on h5, then black would of course do the same, capture on h4, and now both pawns are passed pawns. The difference being that after h6, the black king would have no problem whatsoever catching that pawn, while its counterpart, the white king, has some difficulties. And if the king would go around, the black king would have the time to simply grab the h6 pawn, then support their own passed pawn on h4 and win pretty easily. If white right now would try to play f4 to exchange the pawns and at least save the game, the problem is black would not do that, but first would advance the h-pawn, and only when the king comes to f3, then capture on f4, and as we can see, this typical pawn formation with one file in between the two passed pawns that black has, they kind of indirectly protect each other. The white king can never capture the pawn that's further back, because then the more advanced pawn would run away. So let's go back and check out what happened after g5 and white captures with the h-pawn on g5. Of course, black advances the pawn, and now white is in serious difficulty. If white right now would play f4 again, as we've seen the idea earlier, black again would not capture the pawn right away, but would advance the h-pawn. Now here things are a bit trickier than before, because in addition to playing king f3, in which case pawn captures on f4, and as we said, those two pawns just protect each other, and then the black king just would run around on f7 and g6 and grab the white pawns. Here white has an intermediate move at hand by playing f5. However, very impressively, those three pawns that white has, because one of them is a doubled pawn, or actually two of them rather, the king can hold them off. While after king f3, now that black has two passed pawns with two files in between them, and they are both pretty far advanced, the white king is simply unable to hold both of them off. They simply run away too fast. Let's go back one more time and see the other option that white has right now. Instead of playing f4, just retreating with the king to e3. And right now, black needs to hurry up with the king. The pawn push is not good enough because indeed the white king would get there timely. So the king needs to run to f7 and then run to g6 and then grab the pawn. King h3, and now again this requires precise calculation. It seems that black may be in Zugzwang right now. If either of the black pawns would move, black would just lose the pawn and the game. So the king must move, and that means that black will lose the h4 pawn. If right now white would move back, then black would play e4, a very important move, and then when pawn takes, capture the g4 pawn, and black would have an easily winning endgame having an outside passed pawn on h4. The black king would simply run towards the queenside pawns, and the white king would be busy holding off the h4 pawn, and while the white king would go and grab that pawn, the black king would arrive to the other side much quicker. So therefore this is pretty much losing for white. Or if in this position, instead white would continue with a waiting move by playing a3, then black would go back, protect the pawn, and white is the one in Zugzwang. Now the white king needs to move, and then after d4, white would face similar troubles as described earlier. So let's go back and see what happens after white played king h4. Of course, king takes, and again the problem is that after white promotes the pawn, even though white promotes first, the problem is the black pawn promotes with a check. Right? So now again the catch is that black will be able to make a skewer, even though not quite winning white's queen, but forcing the exchange between the newly born queens. So after king h5, check, and trade. And now, as we can see, the white king is far too far from the crucial part of the board, the queen side, where all the pawns are, and therefore the black king arrives first. By the way, we saw a nice shouldering. The black king was going towards d5 instead of just d3 to make sure keeping the white king further away. And now the white pawns are lost. A very nice endgame. Let's see one more instructive pawn endgame. Here we go. In this endgame, for a change, it is white's turn. And again, the task is to create a passed pawn. And in fact, even better, if white can create two passed pawns, the win may be in the pocket. Well, learning from the last example, hopefully you'll have a hint on what white's first move should be. And in this case, that answer is playing g4. Again, similarly to the last example, white is creating a passed pawn by sacrificing another one. If black right now captures the f4 pawn, white captures on f5, and for example, after king f6, white will be successful in creating a second passed pawn. And as the distance between those two passed pawns is pretty far, in fact 3 lines, obviously, the black king cannot be in 2 sides of the board at the same time. After g4, the more interesting line is, what if black captures the g4 pawn? Of course, still f5 is the correct move. And now, if king f6, we already know, we would just trade on d6 and push the b pawn. If black would try to push his own 3 pawns, similarly again to the last example, the white king would hold them all off with king e3, g4, and then again create another passed pawn. Play c6 first, h5, b5, h4. And now white needs to make a protective move, a defensive move first, get around to f1, making sure to block these pawns off, and there is no progress for black to be made without the help of their king. But their king is far too far, and between white playing b6 next and the f pawn, black cannot hold both of those pawns off. Going back to this position, black responded in the game by trading pawns on c5 and then trying to push the pawn. But things are pretty similar. King e3, g4, and now it's a key moment what to do. White obviously needs to create a second passed pawn. The question is how to do it. The correct way to play is to push c6 and then h5, f6, king takes, d6, and black is helpless. The interesting part is that doing it the other way in the other move order would be a major mistake. d6 would not work immediately, even though it also creates a second passed pawn. Let's see why not. Black now would play d5, followed by c7, king d7, f6, and now d4. All of a sudden, black is coming quick enough, because after king d4, g2, and the black pawn promotes with a check, or alternatively, if the king moves out of the check, again d3 comes with a check, and king takes, g2, and black is the one promoting first. So it was very important the actual move order that white had to choose. A very nicely played endgame by Camacho in Cuba in 1995. And finally, let's see the jewel of the week. Here we go. In this bishop endgame, black is a pawn up, but as we can see, both sides have a far advanced passed pawn. The interesting part is that if now white advances the pawn, and then bishop d5 comes, if now the white king captures the bishop, the black pawn will advance and then get promoted, and the game will be a draw. King takes, h2, pawn promotes, black pawn promotes too, with a check importantly, king c5, and now not capturing the bishop right away, which would allow checkmate of queen d8, but first an intermediate check on c1, and then if king moves, we're ready to capture the bishop, or if the queen blocks, then we can capture simply the pawn, and again reach a drawish endgame. Well, with that in mind, I suggest you take some effort and try to figure out the correct solution on your own. And the beautiful solution is still pawn advance, bishop d5, and now a brilliant idea, bishop a2, threatening black's bishop, but of course the black bishop can capture and still hold off the promotion square. And now comes the brilliant move, b4. Almost checkmate, but not quite. There is en passant. The problem is that now the black bishop no longer controls the promotion square. What an amazing study. And now pawn promotes and white has a winning endgame. Well, thank you for listening. I hope you remember the ideas I shared with you in the pawn endgames, how important it is to create passed pawns. And especially if you can have two passed pawns far enough from each other, typically the enemy king is unable to hold off both. Well, good luck in using these ideas in your games, and be back next week for some more chess ideas. Bye-bye.